Thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Claire Sisson, and I will talk about how we implemented Copilot here at Microsoft. As everybody was getting settled, I went around and introduced myself and get to know a few of you. That was an awesome way to start, and it was also interesting for me to see that a lot of the questions that were shared with me are part of the questions that we asked ourselves. How do you implement it? I have a few licenses. Where do I start? How did the employee really think about using Copilot? How do you implement it in different geos? All of those elements were factors that we looked at as well. And some of it went well out of the gate, and other ones, well, we had some learnings, and I'll be here to share them with you. So over the past year, myself and a few folks at Microsoft had the chance of being part of the internal implementation of Copilot. Now that was energizing, and it was also daunting at times because it's all new. And when you think of AI is triggering a lot of different reaction from people. It's nothing like anything I had done before. And people react in different ways. It can go from people looking at AI and having fear of it, or having privacy concern or security concern, all the way to people being excited and wanting to embrace it as fast as possible. And as we implemented Copilot, we went through all those different scenarios. Now, when we think of people who had the strongest reaction, they had seen sci-fi movies, and they were really having all of that into their brain as they were thinking about how do we put it in place? Should we put it in place? And how do I use it? We also had people who had fear for the value of what they could bring to the company if Copilot was helping them. It was interesting for us to have all those conversations and work hand in hand with everyone so that they could see how Copilot can really extend what they do and help them on the day-to-day. Now let's start with a few numbers. So more than 300,000 people, 150 countries, and more than 12 works councils. And we did that in less than a year. As you can imagine, that's a lot. It's been a journey, but it's been amazing to be able to be part of it. Now, when we think of implementing, there's really three factors that we see people think about when they look at collaboration. The first one is people look to collaborate across boundaries. And they look at doing so because they want to collaborate with people across tenants, across different companies, so they have expectations there. Then you have the fact that they look forward to be able to be everywhere in the world. So you have that complexity of geodiversity, which brings you to different regulations, different compliance, and different cultural expectations that people can have based on the country that they are located or that they come from. And the cultural piece is really an important piece. As I said, AI is something that is fairly personal for a lot of people and that is having a lot of emotional reaction. So understanding really where your audience and your employees are located and what is top of mind for them is really something very important in order to make sure that they get the most of it and that it's truly helpful when they're trying to get their job done on the day-to-day basis. The third one is really around the fact that the employee workforce is diverse. And what I mean by that is people have different expectations in tooling. People have different expectations in what they should be able to do and how they can get it done. And they have those preferences and they expect the companies that they work at to be able to fulfill those needs. So that's a lot. And when you roll out a product, all of those dimensions are there and need to be taken under consideration. So how did we focus ourselves? Well, as we started, we put in place principles. And those principles were anchored around the 4 points that you see here. So optimize for speed of learning cycle. And that was an important one because everything is new and people are shaping their opinion as well as shaping their habits. So having a fast loop of feedback so that you can have an ongoing change and iteration on your rollout plan, the documentation that you do, the training that you provide, the speed at which you roll out is important because you are really driving the implementation and pulling and pushing as people are ready to take on those functions and features. The second one is agility and speed of engagement. AI goes fast. I think we've all seen that. It feels that this year has flown by. So making sure that you have in place an agile mode when you roll out and when you engage, and that you are able to adjust real time as needed is something that has been also very helpful as we did the rollout. The human-centric approach and experience, that is really at the core. Copilot is here to extend people's ability, to help them get their work done, and to enhance their day-to-day experience. So making sure that you make your rollout and your implementation as targeted to the needs of the employees is very important. Trust-aware, secured, and compliant, that's a foundation. That's the foundation that we based upon ourselves on any product that we do and on the implementation that we roll out. So our focus for the implementation applied those 4 principles to those 4 areas of focus. So as you can see, it's a wheel, and I would say it keeps on iterating as you go through the implementation. So we started with the implementation, and that is where, and we'll click into that tile, that's where you look into how are you going to implement it? How do you select the employees you roll it out to? How do you think about all the elements that will enable you to roll out those licenses, have the appropriate employees have access, and be ready to leverage the product out of the gate? Security, compliance, privacy, and works council. That piece is another pillar that we have, and this afternoon we'll have a deeper dive with David and Eileen, who are in the room today, and we'll dedicate an entire hour to this section because it's an important one. And then employee readiness and adoption. That piece is really important to help with the culture part, as well as making sure that the employee in your organization understand what is being rolled out, understand how to use it, are aware of how that can enhance their day-to-day, and can make the most of it. And finally, feedback loop and learnings. And that one, I was reflecting on this right before this session. It's actually all along the wheel, because at all points in time, we have different way of measuring how people are using the product, also getting their feedback, making sure that we adjust real time so that we can really make it relevant and the most helpful experience possible for the employees. So let's dive deeper into the implementation. So the implementation really has 3 pillars: the licensing management, the management of Copilot environment, and then optimizing the experience. So the licensing management, the first component to look at are really the license prerequisite. So the M365 Copilot license has a few prerequisites to look into. Then the second part is really to look at who do you want to roll this out to? And the way we looked at that was to ensure that out of the gate, we would provide the most impact to people who had the best hero scenarios match for the role they had. So we really at first did a role-based rollout. Now that's very different. It's very different from what we've done in the past, and it's very different from what I had been used to. Usually when we roll things out, we do it by different dimensions. Geos, organizations. We don't necessarily do it by role. And that was a new challenge, because when you look at by role, that means a few people in that organization, a few people in that organization. And when you do that, then it requires a different way to look at it. So why did we do it that way? Well, first we rolled out of the gate when the first features and functionalities were available. So we looked at what is available and what are the roles that could benefit from it the most. And that was sales teams and marketing teams, for instance, because the first experience that we had were really the meeting Copilot, for instance. So meeting Copilots, you need to be in a meeting, have a lot of meeting with people, and you can have Copilot help you with the notes, help you with the action item, help you with the follow-up, all items that are very important and very helpful in the roles that I just mentioned. And then, as we had more and more roles identified and features that had hero scenarios that made sense for those roles map out, and those were really hypotheses at the beginning. And then you look at the data, you get the feedback, and you're able to adjust and tweak that way. But as we had more and more of those lined up, then we expanded by teams. Because what we found is that people in teams want to collaborate in the same way, leveraging the same tool. And then from there, we continued to expand. And at the end, we were able to do it by organizations. But it was something very different. We had never done it that way before. One learning is that we started at first, because we had to identify different groups of people, we started at first with security groups. And if it were to be redone, I think that we would go straight to the M365 groups. Because the issues with the security group was it wasn't scalable at a certain point. And it was also hard to keep track of potentially who was in the security groups, in the sense that you can have so much nesting within the security groups. So from a manageability standpoint, scalability standpoint, and to simplify your compliance and all of those factors, I would suggest going straight to groups. That was one of the learning. So that was one learning that we had there. Then management of Copilot. So making sure that your tenant is ready. Tenant hygiene, lifecycle management, and making sure that you onboard and adopt Copilot incremental features as they come up. Finally, optimizing Copilot experience. So that goes back to what I mentioned on rolling in phases, in stages, role by role, or groups of people by groups of people. One item that was interesting is at one point, there was the debate on, do you do it hierarchically? So have all of senior leadership or have whole people of a certain level have access. We refrained from that. We had leadership come on board, obviously, but it was not the first group necessarily to have access to it, because we truthfully made sure that it was a perfect match of experience and a hero scenario mapping. And when you have limited licenses, you want to ensure that you make the most impact and get the most value out of it. So the big part there on that last pillar is really the communications and the support. Communication is super important. So when we would roll out those licenses, we had welcome email that would go out and reach out the various employees that just had their licenses turned on. As part of those welcome emails, we pointed towards a central place where people could go, communicate, have access to resources, and have peers that could help them answer questions. And we also had SMEs on that chat. The other part is support, making sure that your support team is ready to manage the inbound calls. So interestingly, I had assumed many scenarios with the team when we thought of the first calls we would get into our global help desk. I was surprised, but one of the biggest volumes of tickets that we got at first were people wondering why they didn't have access to Copilot. So learning, give the list of who has access to Copilot to your global help desk, to your support, because the fear of missing out is real and people have a lot of passion around making sure that they have access. And if they don't, they want to know how they can get on the list or how do they have access. So that's a big one, and that's a learning. So to summarize for the implementation, prioritize the rollout by key roles in a phased approach. Make sure that you are ready with your licensing management model, and ensure that you over-communicate. Compliance, privacy, security, and works council. So there will be a deep dive on this one this afternoon. And I recommend the session from David Johnson, who's in the front here, and Eileen Zhu, who is in the back. So get the tenant data and governance ready. It is important to leverage the sensitivity label, implementing them, and make sure that you implement the lifecycle management. Then train your employees. And train your employees comes from different angles, really. The first piece is, for instance, we talked about sensitivity labels. Well, how do you use those? And how do you use them in a consistent way? Because for that first column to be really powerful, you need everyone within your company to implement those, leverage those, and do it in a consistent way. And empower the self-service workplace with guardrail, and make sure that people know what role they play and how they need to take care of the life cycle management of their environment and all their assets. Then Works Council. Now that one was a new one for me. I had never engaged with Works Council prior to Copilot. So for those of you who are not aware of what a Works Council is, it is a group of employees in different subsidiaries, so in certain countries, where by regulation, that body of employees has a say on what you can implement or not, and how you do so. So for instance, in our case, we had 12 Works Council countries. For instance, Germany or France or Netherlands, South Korea has one, Italy has one. So you have many around the world. So depending on the footprint of your company and where you have subsidiaries or employees, you may have to take that under account or not. In our case, we manage 12 of them. Now, how do you engage with them? Usually the Works Council is done of a body of peers, employees. So they don't necessarily have the same understanding of what we drive in IT and what we drive in technology. So it's important to really be able to have an open conversation with them. So what we did is we drove transparency and had an ongoing conversation. The first thing that we did was change the rhythm at which we were meeting with them. As a company, they were meeting on a monthly basis. If you think of the speed at which you're trying to drive something and the type of conversation you need to have and an ongoing back and forth, a monthly cadence is really difficult. So in partnership with those Works Council, we changed the cadence and we created something called a Power Hour. And that's every other week meeting that we have. During that meeting, we come and we show demos. We walk them through the new features and functionality. And we answer their questions. Now, what is top of mind for them is really making sure that the well-being of the employees is taken under consideration and is applied, as well as the local regulations. So we had those conversations with them. And And with the input that they gave us, we were able to have the product have improvement, as well as making sure that they understood truly what Copilot did versus the notions or the perceptions that they could have. Because again, AI is something that creates strong reaction at times from people. So making sure that you manage proactively that relationship with the Works Council and that you have those open conversation with them is something that we have found very powerful. And when we think of the rollout, they were some of the first one to get the licenses too. So once we started to have roles that had individuals in those countries, we made sure they had access to it firsthand and were able to then test and have conversation with us and play with it themselves. Now in our conversation with them, usually they are a binary system. Either they approve for something to be rolled out or they reject for something to be rolled out. Because we put in place that ongoing transparency and conversation, took their feedback, implemented it, we went into a stage that was in between. And it's really a learning stage that we had with them. And being on that journey together is really what changed the conversation with them. And I'm happy to say that we're rolled out in all 12 Works Councils country right now. Going back to compliance, privacy, security, and Works Council, the three main items are proactively engage with the Works Council early, implement the 10 steps of getting the tenant data governance, and David will touch on it this afternoon, and the sensitivity labels. Now, employee readiness and adoption. As I mentioned, that is an item that is top of mind, especially when you think of driving culture change. Communicating, over-communicating, making sure that your employees are ready, understand the features and functionality available for them, and are ready to leverage and make the most out of the product is really an important stage. So as I mentioned before, we started with the welcome email and prioritizing that onboarding. Now, in that welcome email, you had links to various tips and tricks. You had various explanation of what the product could do. And you also had a link to that central place that I mentioned. So that central place, we started in Teams, and that's another learning. We started in Teams because it was a natural place for us to be in. That's where we work every day. And really fast, we had to evolve to Viva Engage because the challenge that we had was the scalability, the ability to monitor it like you would do for any social media, be able to pin some of the questions, be able to catalog these, because you can imagine as you scale, you want some of those rubrics to be available in a more streamlined way. When you use Team, it's challenging. It's more, it's helpful, but at that scale and for that level of questions and back and forth that you have, it was better to do Viva Engage. So highly recommend Viva Engage for your rollout for the central place. Then from there, we had trainings that we created and made available for everyone with the Viva Learning courses. And we really took a two-prong approach. So we had all the efforts that we drove at our level from MSD, which is the internal IT of Microsoft, with that central place, with the welcome email, with some tips and tricks, with some demos that we would do at scale. But we also had the local presence. Because again, the people locally, be it by country, be it by organization, will need to have something that speaks to them directly for them to really make the most out of Copilot. So we had people locally in the different geos, making sure that they would drive those sessions. And we expanded to have people in HR do it for HR group, or finance do it for the finance group. And having that one-to-many, as well as one-to-one or one-to-small group, was a great way to activate people's adoption and engagement. So highly recommend taking that two-prong approach. Having an ongoing adoption program is important. So ongoing tips and tricks, having local champions, and leveraging all the latest demos in local languages and done locally is very impactful. So the learning there, central place, then localize your engagement, and that can mean many things. That can be geos or that can be by organization. And engage the senior leaders to drive adoption and product evangelism. So for that one, an item that I did not expect also is the fact that though you do all of that awareness, all of that training, and you have a good level set that has been shared with the employees, there is a factor with AI where people want to almost get permission to use Copilot in a way. Because you still have that cultural difference between the expectation and what they know they should do on the day-to-day basis. So an example I can share there is the fact that, for example, at Microsoft, you have different moments in the year, 2 moments in the year, where you do a personal conversation with your manager, you explain what you've been working on, and you discuss what you're going to work on for the period to come. We call that a connect. And we suggested for employees to leverage Copilot for the connect, because it's a wonderful way to have all of those items that you've done summarized for you. And then you can just polish it, edit it, and put it into the tool. It was interesting to see that though it was a great opportunity to actually make the most out of it so that every employee could focus into actually what they enjoy doing, their work, and where they can bring the most value, and less into that almost administrative task that sync is, or putting it into the tool can be. But people, at least in my team, were fairly surprised and had a double take moment where they asked, hey, Claire, are you sure I can use Copilot in order to write this and it's going to be okay? So giving your employees that permission and giving them the comfort that, yeah, I want you to use Copilot for this, because I want you to focus on the great work that you do and the most impact that you can drive. Leverage it to really enhance what you can provide, because at the same time, it's really hard when you do those kind of moments to recall all the items you had contributed to. So having Copilot help you, and then you just edit on top of it, is something that is really helpful. So having the leadership team demonstrate and remind people that using Copilot is something of great value for themselves and for the company is also something that is very helpful. So feedback loop and learning. We had that on an ongoing basis, as I mentioned. So you have the feedback that you can provide in the product, the thumbs up, thumbs down. And please do use it when you have feedback. Our engineering team, our product team, we all look at it and we make sure that we leverage your feedback and iterate on the product in order to make it even more powerful for you and for everyone. Then the community and the field insight. All of those forums I mentioned to you where we would do demos, local training, as well as that one-to-many forum where we could have an engagement, we leveraged that to get feedback, understand what worked, what didn't work so well, and what we could do differently. That is a very powerful way to get real-time feedback from your employees and adjust as needed. And you're going to need to adjust it. It is an iteration, and it is depending on who is using it, what they do, where they're located. Again, they'll have different perception, they'll have different need. So having that iteration mode is really the secret sauce to make it relevant for the people within your organization. We also did experience research. So surveys, getting feedback from that standpoint, and then the ticket, support ticket. As I mentioned, big learning on make sure that you give the list of who you give access to your support team is an important one. And then getting feedback on what other support tickets come during your journey, because it's a journey and you'll get different type of questions at different moments. And then finally, we have reporting. And the reporting that we leverage right now is in the Viva Insight dashboard for Copilot. We started by measuring WOW, so weekly average user. We did MAU, we did DAO. And now we are evolving really to look at hours saved. And that is one of the metrics that you have in that dashboard. That's an important one, an interesting one to look at when you think of people asking you, okay, what is Copilot bringing me back? And I know a lot of you have shared, you get that question. So having that hour save is something that we look at, you can look at. Now, I would use a word of caution that the hour saved does not mean that that hour is now going to be available necessarily for something else completely different. It's important to think about how we free people's time so that they can have more impact and that they can also continue to engage and bring more value. So an hour where you are not taking notes or an hour where you are not thinking about the action item is an hour that you gain in order to have deep thinking and really think critically about the other programs that you need to drive or the other work that you need to do. So it's not an equivalent of 1 hour saved equal X amount of dollars, I would say. All right, I think we touched on most points here. So start to assess your employees' perception so that you can adjust your rollout, understand if you need to do more readiness, more information, or adjust the roles and hero scenarios that you have identified. Provide multiple chances for feedback so that you can get that ongoing loop and adjust the rollout as needed. All right, we covered a lot. So I centralized it all into this slide. You can see the 4 areas with the key takeaway we talked about. The main learnings are really proactively engage with sponsors and senior leaders, because those senior leaders are the ones that need to drive the urgency and the prioritization. Every company has a lot going on. Making sure people understand it is important, it needs to be prioritized, and it needs to be implemented fast is something that is really helpful, because resistance to change is true in any product and in any change. But this one is one, again, that has more reaction than others. And if you remember those people that I mentioned at the beginning that were more resistant to AI, well, I can tell you the great news is if I were to ask that question right now to the ones that I had the most conversation with, they don't want to hand back their license because they don't want to be taking those notes. They don't want to be having to attend all the calls instead of being able to zoom back and have a recap of a meeting that they didn't attend. The value is there. It's just a journey to be able to get people to embrace it as any change and helping them really understand that this is an extension and it helps enhance their experience. Then proactively engage with legal, human resources, works council, security. Implement the agile method and phased rollout. And prepare your tenant. All right, so a few sources of information, because I covered a lot, and we have packaged everything for you. So there is a new article that we have published for you that is covering the deployment in more depth. So you'll be able to refer to it. Our Microsoft IT that I'm part of has an inside track where we publish a lot of articles that share how we do things, our learning there. And then I recommend going to this afternoon's deep dive session on governance and administration from David and Eileen. And we have a new hub that has been launched on adoptionmicrosoft.com that shares all the resources, learnings. You'll see this deck on adoption.com later today. And it will have videos and a whole bunch of things that you can leverage in order to extend the adoption. All right, so I think now I'll take some questions.
Actually, I have two questions. The first being, do you have a list, I might be able to ask Copilot for it, but a list of the most impactful use cases when you're looking to do the deployment? And then the second is that there's, I believe, a Copilot for desktop. Does it have the capability of going through your OneDrive and SharePoint locations and determining whether documents should be classified as sensitive? Because I think by and large, people generally aren't putting sensitivity labels on files. So it'd be nice to be able to kind of scour through that and at least have it do it itself based on, I guess, whatever criteria it's looking at.
So 2 questions. Yes. Thank you, Eileen. So the first one regarding the best use cases. So we have on the site highlighted the key roles and the hero scenarios that map to it. Okay. And if you look at the article actually that we posted back in November versus this one, you'll see that those have evolved. Because as we get more learnings and as we get functionalities that get enriched, then those actually evolve as well. Okay. So yes, absolutely. We have a list of those key roles and the hero scenarios. But the only caveat that I would give though is what is a hero scenario and a key role for Microsoft may not be necessarily the same thing for you, right? So I think the main groups like HR or communication or legal, those would be valid ones mostly. The other ones, I think you would have to look at them and adjust them potentially for your needs. Then the second question that you had, was that linked to Windows Copilot that you were referring to?
Yeah, to see if it can classify documents as being sensitive or not.
So actually, I don't have the answer to this one. David, do you have the answer to this one?
Yeah, I can talk about that. I'll talk about labeling this afternoon in my session. Generally speaking, though, you use Microsoft Information Protection to either help you default label, help you auto label, or help you trap and label appropriately. And we'll talk more about that today. Files in your OneDrive and SharePoint, yes, as long as you have the license for the 365 Copilot, Windows Copilot will reason over those files too and return them just like anything else in the service. They're connected to a graph, assuming that, of course, the user is licensed for the 365 Copilot.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other question? Many questions. Let's start here and then we'll come right to you.
So we currently don't use Viva. And
Okay.
Do you have another suggestion where we can place our resources centrally?
Well, SharePoint would be a place where you can do it. Teams worked great until we had to scale. So it depends on the size of your organization.
About 3,000.
Yeah, 3,000 would work with Teams. Yeah, we started with Teams with the first 3,000 people, and it worked great. It's once you need to start to really scale at a different level that it gets trickier. You good? We answered your question?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thanks. Hey. It's kind of a question and a favor. So if you could just tell us who in our organizations would most benefit from Copilot, it would save us a lot of time. So like many organizations, I'm sure you're like ours, we have this many users and we have this many Copilot licenses. And we're trying to figure out, we're doing the EAP, we're doing kind of our own EAP. So we're figuring out, well, you know, who best benefits? Is in our organization, we're healthcare. So is it physicians? Is it admin? Is it IT? It's, you know, we're dissecting personas. We're trying to better understand how the use cases. It's a lot of work. So is there a magic formula? Is there something that Microsoft is learning that they can share with us that says we've identified that these people that do these things would most benefit from Copilot as individuals and also as an enterprise? So you give individuals license for Copilots, they do great things, they become more productive, that's good for them and their teams. But then at the enterprise level, what groups, what types of personas, when you give them Copilot, really boost the efficiency at just a much larger scale, kind of like an amplifier? So that's all I need.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Well, so I'm sorry, I don't have the perfect answer that you're seeking. I wish I could hand you over a full list with everything in the playbook. It really depends on what you do. What I would say though is start with the hero scenarios. So look at what do people do? What are the jobs to be done for those employees, right? So is it meetings? Is it creating from net new? So for instance, for us, the scenario of communication was a good one because it enables people to really not start from scratch and be able to summarize. And that really enabled, and to your point of enterprise efficiencies, that helps because then you can have a more streamlined communication and you can think about having a faster turnaround on the impact. So it all depends. You can do also cohorts. We did some cohorts in order to be able to look at the different groups, and then based on the outcome, then you can iterate and adjust.
So if we find that, and what we found that most people are like, Teams and Outlook, that's the two best use cases. That gives them back the most time.
So if we look across the organization, and we can do this, right? Because we have insights and things we can see, well, who's attending
and you
the
have
most
that
meetings?
in the dashboard. You can see see which groups, and you can see what apps they use. So
we can look at our current Copilot users that are attending a lot of meetings and maybe drill down a little bit on them and using Copilot and Outlook.
You'll have it
and then
at a
apply that
macro level.
going forward as kind of the part of the recipe to distribute Copilot.
Yes, and also once you have a sweet spot, then think of extending within teams, right? Because a group of people will collaborate together and they create their norm of how they collaborate and how they engage together. So then you start that flywheel. So you want to make sure you identify the pockets of roles and the sweet spot for the hero scenarios, and then expand by adding within those groups teams that can have access to it. And from there you can expand.
All right, I'm definitely coming to that guy's session this afternoon. Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Quick question around sort of like learning and those types of areas. Is there like a minimum amount of guidance and learning that you found that people in the organization have needed before they become sort of competent? And would, almost is there a valid case for sort of mandating learning before you give them a license and those types of things, or how have you found that evolve?
That's a good question. I don't think that it was one size fits all, because it depended again on the role and the culture of the group that you were looking at. So depending on the country, you can have different expectation of, I want to be trained before I really put my hands on. At Microsoft, we're expected to, and we're used to just play with the tech. So it's slightly different. We may have had a different engagement than you may have from that standpoint. But what we found is the product is actually pretty self-explanatory. So when you give access to the licenses, people start to play with it out of the gate. And they've heard about it. They have that fear of missing out is real. As I said, I didn't expect so many people to request it, but they did. So you have that flywheel coming out of the gate. And when you create those champions, that lights up the ecosystem, because then you have people who are becoming local expert. And they're very proud to share and demonstrate for their team, demonstrate for their colleagues, go help people on the right, on the left. And when you have that feedback loop, then you can identify, okay, for that country, what seems to work? For that team, what seems to work? And you have areas where it's potentially a little bit more reluctant, either because it's not a perfect match in hero scenario just yet, or because it's not something they're slower at embracing new tech for one reason or another. And that group, having the leadership team really set the tone and encourage them and incent them to do so, is going to be an activator. So that's why we took the two-prong approach. But depending on where you were, some regions or some local hub were doing it slightly different, or HR team may do it differently than the finance team. You still had our umbrella, but then you can have different flavors. And when you decentralize that, it really makes it real, because people prefer to hear from their peers in the team than from us in IT.
Thank you. Just wondering how you dealt with non-usage with licenses. So as we deployed this, we found that we had a large group that loved it and used it daily and weekly, and then someone used it a few times and then stop. How did you guys deal with that? And then did you redeploy license? Did you pull them back after a certain amount of time? And just how you handled that?
So what we didn't pull it back. What we did do, though, is have more listening in those pockets, understanding what is that miss in that experience. What is not resonating? Is it because we had a hypothesis around a match of hero scenarios and roles, and the hypothesis is now proven that there may be not just yet a match for them? Or is it because they need more training? Or is it because they need that permission from leadership because they still have some thoughts on maybe being hesitant? And that's where having surveys, having conversation with them will fine-tune that adoption and enable you to be able to drive more usage and engagement.
And so when you found that it wasn't a good match based off your original hypothesis, how did you pivot from that point?
Well, at Microsoft, there wasn't really many of those, because between teams...
Because you guys are awesome.
No, but because we're always in teams, so we have meetings, right? And being able to recap your meetings, being able to have Copilot take notes, give you action item is super helpful. Or we have a ton of emails. So leveraging it to help you just spend less time in your inbox, coach you on how to write those emails, enable you to really not spend so much time in there, super helpful. Then you have to write different documents. So again, then you use Word. So it depends of your stack, maybe, it depends of those scenarios. That's why for us, it was potentially different as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so besides all of these people requesting Copilot because they were missing out,
Yes.
what was the most unexpected, unintentional impact of rolling out Copilot? What surprised you that you didn't anticipate?
Well, actually, the fact that the people that resisted at the beginning, that were having such a strong opinion, that were really belief-based, that they changed their mind just in a few months. I did not expect that.
Was there something that you did in particular to convert these vocal detractors to become supporters? Or was it just happened?
I think it's just the value of the product, the fact that they saw their peer use it, they used it, and then they realized that it brought the value that they were seeking, and that it wasn't really as scary as they thought. It's doing notes for you. It's helping you take action. It's helping you write your connect. It's really there to enhance and enable you. And that, I think people can only go over that fear if they go through it and if they use it themselves, so they can shape their own opinion versus having conceptions based on theories.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry if this is just repetitive, but
No, go for it.
The original slide, so Microsoft has rolled it out to 225,000 people. Do you have any sense of the engagement across that, like how much usage there is?
So our engagement, I think, is in the high. That's a tough one. I didn't check today. It's above 70%, I think. I don't know the latest. I can tell you that with the surveys that we did out of the gate, the response to, okay, does this make me more productive? Is this helping me start when I start from blank? And do I feel it brings value? We're all in the high 80s, okay. In the high 80s. And that has not really changed that much. It oscillates between 70s and 80s plus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we are starting to roll out Copilot, and one of the things that we need to do is justify, or teams to justify whether or not they need Copilot or whether it was beneficial. So you showed us hours saved in Viva Insights. Is there other quantitative and qualitative measures? I know you have the survey.
Right.
I guess, what's the threshold to know whether or not it was a successful rollout to a certain team or users?
So looking again at hours saved, usage. The other thing, and it's a hypothesis at this moment in time, so we're still measuring and looking into it, it's that it enables you to make better decision and better engagement. So for instance, when you are in a team meeting and you have Copilot do the notes for you and the action item, Copilot is going to ignore the title. It's going to ignore all of those things, and it's going to take from the conversation who took the action, who has the most knowledge, and will suggest the next step, which as humans, usually we are not going to give the task to the person that is the highest in the hierarchy or things like that. But Copilot is just going to try to get it done. So it's going to say, all right, it should be David and Claire, and David is going to take the action or something like that. And so we're still measuring it. I don't have the outcome of it yet, but we think that it will enable better decision making because it will just ignore who's who in the zoo and just say, all right, this is what needs to get done, and those people should be working on it.
So you mentioned this like a minute ago, talking about the questions that you ask in the survey. What kind of questions do you ask in your surveys?
So we have different items. So if you look on the website, we have the ones for the works study.
So do you have the survey examples like on your website?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
So
okay.
you can look at the outcome of the survey. You can see all the results, so you don't have to take my memory and the percentage there. It's available up there. But we had like different types. Some of them are really to understand, is it helpful? Is it helping your productivity? All of those things. And then you have other ones where we try to understand how do you use it? And why do you use it then and not then, etc.
Okay.
So different types to be able to do research and to be able to then enhance the experience where needed.
And how often do you send out surveys?
So that's a good question. So in general, we try to not spam our employees. So we sequence the surveys, and we try to not always send the surveys to the same population, because you can imagine we have so many products. If I'm asking you today, how do you like Teams? Tomorrow, how do you like Copilot? And the day after, how do you like SharePoint? You would be like, okay, Claire, I've had enough, right? So we try to make sure that we sequence it, and we take samples really of the employees, and we try to randomize that based on geolocation, roles, etc. I would say that, I don't know, it's hard depending on the group that you're part of, if you are in cohorts or not. You'll get one every couple of quarters, or you'll get one every quarter.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you coming today.